I, I, yeah, I didn't tighten the lug nuts because soon I'll be taking the wheels off because I had to replace the wheel bearing and I have a clutch issue. The pedal doesn't want to come back often, and I got to flutter the clutch pedal with my foot to with the gas off to get the clutch pedal to come up, and then I can hit the gas. And the owner's manual says every 12,000 miles, take the check the clutch, and while you're checking the clutch for wear, put grease on the sleeve for the throwout bearing, and that's every 12,000 miles. So this thing, that none of that's been done for a long, long time. So I suspect that when I take it apart, the throwout bearing will have had maybe a groove cut in the like a wear because it wasn't greased. So I may have to spend a little money there. But anyway, it's a 87 Mondial, and it had 225 55s 16s on the back, 205 55s in the front. And the car will not drive at 50 miles an hour. 45 miles an hour in third or 55 miles an hour in fourth. It will not drive at 50 unless you're driving downhill at two strokes. It doesn't, it won't cruise in bogging, it won't cruise in a bogging state. And in third gear at 50 miles an hour, it's peaky and wants to be tramped. So I'm hoping that these half-inch lower tires will make it so it'll drive a little closer to 50 miles an hour in fourth and maybe 57 miles an hour in fifth, when right now I hardly ever put it in fifth unless I'm breaking the speed limit because I don't like the highway. So anyway, this car was badly smashed. It was smashed right through. The whole front end was crushed up to the control arms. Like literally, it got side scrapes striped. Like the whole front end was pushed like this way. And the frame that comes up to hold the bumper was hard against the tire, the spare tire, and this frame was hard against that tire, and all this was just totally mangled. So what I did, I cut the frame off completely. Now, where the control arms were bolted on, and that frame was extra heavy duty, and it didn't appear to get any impact from the accident. The front end, the bumper area took it all. So I cut the entire front, not the control arm, not the frame for the control arm, not the important stuff, but all the bumper related metal I cut off, and I straightened out the fenders, and this piece right here, that is the alignment piece of the entire front end. That bolts directly to the frame with sheet metal screws with no adjustment, and that bolts to the fenders with no adjustment, which line up with the doors with no adjustment. Once I got this done, then I straightened out the hood and held it in place with blocks of wood until I had this piece, both fenders and the hood fitting. Then I straightened out the frame piece by piece and connected all the dots back to hook onto the front of this piece and the hood mount, which is also the radiator mount. Now, after I welded and got the frame mocked up to hold this piece in place, and the hood and the fenders in line, and the hood fit, then I proceeded in finishing the supports for the frame, and then the subframes that went off to support the fenders and the end of the bumpers and all the other stuff, because the whole front end is made from triangles, square and triangles of square stock, 3/4 by 1.5 inch square stock, most of it, all in triangles coming ahead to hold the whole front end. So one of these cars, if it's in a parking lot and somebody backs into it and bumps it, a 5 mile per hour bump, it's a total write-off because it'll spring the frame and all the alignment will be thrown out and it'll have to go to a state-of-the-art body shop to be straightened, which is a write-off. Like a simple bump will totally destroy this car. These cars are not made for impact. They don't have there's even a 5 mile per hour bump. It's a write-off because it'll jar and bend and twist the frame out of proportion, which puts all the panels out of proportion. So anyway, after I got the frame welded together, and of course, every time I welded on the frame, it warped and pulled all the alignment out, which I had to jack and pry and use come-alongs and hydraulics. And I pulled everything back into shape and then welded some more and pulled everything back. And even it was quite an ordeal. But after I got the front end together, then I fiberglass, the front bumper's all fiberglass, and it was in about 6 pieces. And I basically built the whole thing. I pieced it back together. It has 1/4 inch square stock going through the center of it for strength, which was all bent, and I had to cut it out, weld a new piece in, and then fit the fiberglass chunks back on and weld them back together. And you can't see any of the construction that I did because it's all behind panels and fiber, kind of a fiberglass shield for the spare tire. So you can't, even with the hood open, you can't see any of the frame. You can see a little bit of the frame from underneath the car, but anyway, all these brackets that held the headlight were just totally mangled beyond recognition. Both headlights were totally beyond recognition. It's a brand new radiator, new fans, and this only got one crack in it, and one plug over here has a crack in it. But that survived the accident. But all this was literally crushed right up into boat here. And anyway, this part of the hood was all right, but this was all bent down here. And I still have to put that kind of heat shield, insulated heat shield on that because of the radiator. I haven't got around to doing that. But that's pretty much about it. The car has low miles. It doesn't even have 60,000 miles on it. And it's a Nova Scotia car with no rust. I had the car smashed up for 10 years in a barn down the road, and a friend of mine had it, and he called me up and said, come get it. So I went and he sold it to me, and then I had quite a time getting the motor to run right. I had to spend a fortune. I had to replace every gas-related item, and the gas, it had 15 gallons of old stinky gas, which I had to flush the tank about 10 or 20 times to get that all cleaned up. But it was quite an ordeal. But in the end, I got it working good. But now, and last summer, the alternator went. I had some electrical issues with that. But I got that all behind me. But I have to do this wheel bearing and take the side of the motor apart and investigate and invest in the clutch rebuilding a little bit. But the car, everything works good. Sometime in the past, someone had the motor out, and they, I don't know what they did, but they did have the motor out because instead of taking the gas hoses off between the two gas tanks, they cut the shifter rod off and then pushed it back 1/8 of an inch and MIG welded it back together. So the shifter down here was hitting the post, and I took the shields off and reached it up in with my wrenches and loosened off the turnbuckle. And with some chalk, I marked where everything was and then loosened it off and readjusted the shaft going to the shifter. So it's centered in the, it's got a fancy name, what it's called, the plate down here, the aluminum plate the gate, I guess it's called. Anyway, I got it adjusted so it was right perfect, and then I tightened up this turnbuckle thing and put the car back together. And so no harm, but yeah, garage stations, some people do some pretty crude things. But these are hard cars to work on. But anyway, I don't know if I can think of anything else. The car was in considerably bad shape, but I painstakingly straightened and worked on it until I got everything fitted. But it was really weird because on the fenders, when I had a little bit of crookedness, where one fender curled a little more than the other one, when I hammered and worked on it a little tiny bit, it put the entire front end out of alignment, and the hood didn't fit. And I'd have to spend like 2 days hammering here and there and twisting things everywhere. Just a little bit of a movement in one corner threw off the hood up way over on the other side of the car. And it was quite a job getting all that adjustment just right. Plus, when I was welding the frame and the warps that I encountered, and it went a little crooked, I had to kind of memorize it right on the spot, stop what I was doing, and hook up apparatuses to pull it back. Because if I left it that way and then welded it some other place and got another warp, then I lost my bearings on how to bring it back to where it was, because I have now 2 or 3 compound warps working against each other, doing funky things. So I straightened out my warps in the body work and the frame, because the frame and the body on these cars are one. It's not like an old car which has a great big massive fender that bolts on with lots of spacers and big holes. These things are held together with sort of like sheet metal screws that go through an 1/8-inch hole with no adjustment on the crucial parts. Like I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right down there. See that? There it is, right there. See that red painted nut or bolt? There's another one. That is the alignment of the entire front end with no adjustment going into that's the body to the frame right there. If those are out, like there's no spacers, there's no big oval holes, and I didn't modify anything. I left it kind of exactly the way they did it, and I straightened everything. But the main thing that I did was straightening my warps as I got them and bringing it back to neutral where the hood still fit, because I learned that if I let it go 2 or 3 warps, then I couldn't, it was almost impossible to bring it back to where it was. It's hard to explain, but when I did a little bit and I saw something move, I could move it back. But if I did 2 or 3 things, then things didn't fit. I didn't know where to go, because you have to follow a pattern when you're working on things. But anyway, I can't explain it. All I know is I was able to do it. But and everything works. So anyway, that's a long video, almost 15 minutes. So see you guys. Hope you enjoy yourself. Goodbye.